Hello, everyone. Thank you for attending today's webinar, Mold Matters, Strategies for Prevention and Effective Claim Management. My name is Brian Taylor. I'm the insurance subsegment leader here at Antea Group, and I'm happy to be your moderator for today's session. Okay, I'm going to read Antea Group's disclaimer language here. Antea Group's webinars, training presentations, newsletters, and related materials provide general information regarding a particular subject and are not intended to constitute professional advice. Further, as it relates to this topic, Antea Group and its employees, officers, directors, and owners are not licensed insurance professionals. Therefore, if you have any questions regarding insurance coverage in general or that you currently carry as it relates to today's topic, those questions should be directed to your insurance providers. Okay, before we get started, a few housekeeping items. A copy of today's slide deck and additional materials are available on the resource list that you should see on your screen. If you have questions during the broadcast, please submit those to the Q&A tool, again, on your screen, and we'll answer those at the end of the discussion. However, if we run out of time, we'll answer any unanswered questions via a follow-up email. The webcast is being streamed through your computer, so for the best audio quality, please make sure your computer or headset volume is turned up so you can hear the presenters. If you're experiencing any problems, most of those can be resolved with a quick screen refresh. An on-demand version of the webinar will be available about 2 hours after today's broadcast and can be accessed using the same link you received in your email when you registered. It will also be available in our webinar library on our website in the next few days. And now I'd like to introduce our presenters for today's session. First, Janine Lyda. She's Antea Group's Industrial Hygiene Service Line Lead. She's a seasoned health and safety professional and industrial hygienist with over 12 years of professional experience. Janine excels in exposure sampling and monitoring, ensuring workplaces adhere to health and safety standards and ultimately protect their employees. Bill Wesner. He's a senior project manager with over 24 years of environmental consulting experience, including industrial hygiene activities, and Bill specializes in mold, water intrusion, and asbestos inspections. And finally, Carrie Renotis. She's a project manager with 24 years of environmental consulting experience, and she also specializes in mold, asbestos, and due diligence. As I mentioned, I'm Antea Group's insurance subsegment leader, and I have over 20 years of experience specializing in environmental health and safety and sustainability consulting. Our agenda for today's presentation. Janine's going to provide an overview of mold. Bill is going to review some interesting case studies. And then finally, Carrie is going to discuss maintenance and management plans. I'll come back on with some key takeaways, and then we'll have a short Q&A if there's time. And with that, I will hand it over to Janine.
Thank you, Brian, and hello, everyone. Today we're going to talk about mold, examples of mold case studies in insurance, and strategies for mitigation. Mold overall is a common issue in many buildings. So first, let's start with the basic definition and environmental conditions that allow it to grow, which will give us a baseline for understanding throughout this webinar today. The term mold is a collective non-technical name for filamentous cell and spore-forming microfungi. Molds are a ubiquitous component of our environment, and depending on vegetation and human-made sources, can be found in varying degrees according to season and regions in outdoor air and indoor spaces, and potentially further grow in the right conditions. There are several common types of mold that you might encounter. Today, I'm just going to introduce 3 of the most discussed in terms of indoor mold. However, there are numerous species that are considered indoor moisture indicators. Aspergillus is commonly found in household dust and can cause allergic reactions. Cladosporium, which can grow in both warm and cool areas and is often found on fabrics and wood surfaces or cellulose fibers. And Stachybotrys, which is also known as the black mold and is notorious for its potential health risks and is usually found in areas with chronic moisture problems. Overall, mold requires three main conditions to grow: moisture, organic material, and suitable temperatures. Therefore, mold can only develop and grow if there is sufficient moisture in materials or on surfaces. Moisture can come from water source leaks, high humidity, or condensation. Organic materials such as wood, paper, or drywall provides the nutrients food source mold needs to grow. And finally, mold thrives in temperatures between 60 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit, which are common in most indoor environments. One thing I want to stress, as other parts are discussed later on in the presentation and the case studies and prevention, is that the key to controlling mold is to control moisture. Or conversely, if you control the moisture, you control the mold. Now let's discuss the health impacts of mold moisture. We will keep this high level today, but worth noting when covering mold and ultimately why it's important to address mold issues. Simply put, mold can have significant effects on our health, particularly on the respiratory system. First, let's talk about respiratory issues. Mold exposure can trigger allergies or allergic symptoms such as sneezing, runny nose, and itchy eyes. For individuals with asthma, mold can exacerbate their condition, causing more frequent and severe asthma attacks. Additionally, mold exposure can contribute to other respiratory conditions such as chronic bronchitis and sinus infections. Mold doesn't just affect the respiratory system, it can also cause skin irritation, leading to rashes and itching. Eye irritation is another common symptom with redness, watering, and discomfort. And in severe cases, mold exposure can lead to infections, particularly in individuals with weakened immune systems. Next, let's explore the primary cause of mold growth in buildings. Understanding these causes can help us take preventative measures to avoid mold problems. Water damage is one of the most common causes of mold growth. This can result from leaking pipes, roof leaks, flooding, and high humidity levels. When water infiltrates a building, it creates the perfect environment for mold to thrive. It's essential to address any water damage promptly to prevent mold from taking hold. Another significant factor is poor ventilation. Inadequate airflow in areas like bathrooms, kitchens, and basements can lead to moisture buildup. Without proper ventilation, these areas become breeding grounds for mold. Ensuring good airflow and using exhaust fans can help reduce the risk of mold growth. And lastly, maintenance issues play a crucial role in mold prevention. Neglected repairs and poor building or structure maintenance can lead to persistent moisture problems. Regular inspections and timely repairs are vital to keeping mold at bay. By staying on top of maintenance, we can significantly reduce the likelihood of mold growth, which Carrie will discuss later in mold management plans. Now that we've covered the general types of mold environments that lead to growth, let's shift our focus to the critical process of mold assessments. Understanding how accurately to assess mold presence, severity, and potential health risks is essential to effective remediation and prevention. We'll dive into some high-level methods used to evaluate mold in a building or structure. Generally speaking, mold assessment means an inspection, investigation, or survey of a building or other structure in order to gather information regarding the presence, identification, or evaluation of mold, which can include the collection or analysis of mold samples. Post-remediation verification is an inspection and assessment. This process typically includes a visual and olfactory inspection and may include environmental sampling and analytical testing to verify that the project has been satisfactorily completed. As best practice, mold assessments and post-remediation should be performed by an independent third-party competent professional, either at the initial discovery of mold or at the conclusion of a remediation project. During a mold assessment, the goal of the visual inspection, in addition to the sampling process, is to gather vital information regarding the presence, identification, and evaluation of mold. If visual mold is observed, it could be actively growing, however, not always the case. To begin to determine mold growth in types, different sampling methods are utilized together to assess mold contamination. These include air sampling, which helps in measuring airborne mold spores within a given space and typically compared to an outdoor reference sample. This can indicate whether a certain type of mold is actively growing. Bulk sampling, which involves collecting physical samples of materials that may contain mold and either using it as a live culture for growth potential, or surface sampling, which is used to collect mold from surfaces for analysis that can be used for presumptive species identification. Again, these sampling techniques can be used once mold remediation is carried out. Post-remediation verification is essential to confirm that the mold has been effectively removed. A classic example where air sampling was used for verification was in a project containment where mold spores were elevated after the contractor was finished remediating. However, the air sampling said otherwise. The contractor eventually fully opened one of the walls in the containment area that was not remediated completely. Once the process was actually complete, the air sampling was conducted again, and finally, the spores were below the reference sample to indicate it was remediated. I also want to note that it's important that data interpretation is a critical part of the process. The results from various sampling methods need to be analyzed carefully to understand the extent of mold contamination, or if there is not an issue in some cases as well. And finally, there are no universally recognized numerical guidelines or standards for mold levels. So assessments rely on expert judgment, scientific understanding, and professional experience. Sampling for mold should always be conducted by experienced professionals who follow established guidelines and protocols. The American Industrial Hygiene Association and the American Conference of Governmental Industrial Hygienists provide standards for sampling methods and analysis and best practices. It's important to use appropriate PPE or personal protective equipment during sampling or understand hazards and risks of these environments. Sampling is particularly necessary when visible mold growth is present and when there are unexplained health issues among occupants or for post-remediation verification. Additionally, some states require mold assessors and remediators to be licensed. States like Florida, Texas, New York, and Louisiana have specific licensing requirements to ensure that professionals are qualified to handle mold issues. It is important to note that the local requirements and regulations should be followed. So having established a comprehensive understanding of mold, including its causes, effects, and remediation, we can now have Bill delve into specific case studies within the insurance industry. These examples will illustrate how insurance companies handle mold-related claims, highlighting both the challenges and solutions encountered in real-world scenarios.
Thanks, Janine. Now that we have a solid understanding of the background and conditions that foster mold growth, let's get into some real-world case studies. By examining these case studies, we can gain valuable insights into practical solutions and best practices for mold management for the insurance claims. First, we'll discuss a remediation project of a multi-unit apartment building fire and cover the incident, the remediation process, and the final outcomes. Back in July of 23, a significant fire occurred in an apartment complex, causing extensive fire, smoke, and water damage due to the activation of a sprinkler system. The insurer completed the investigation 2 months later, but permitting delays led to over a year-long reconstruction delay. Upon reconstruction, mold was observed and the remediation contractor was hired. Now, during this time, you have to understand that the apartment itself didn't have any windows or doors and was exposed to the environment. The remediation contractor had spent 2 weeks cleaning, disinfecting, and encapsulating all the exposed framing and plywood with antimicrobial sealant. But despite the thorough cleaning, the contractor's final invoice was for several $100,000 was submitted nearly 2 years after the fire. You have to understand that it's common practice for a remediation contractor or any sort of contractor after a fire to encapsulate any charred wood or smoke damaged wood with an encapsulant. That is a typical remediation process after a fire, not just for mold. So some of the challenges faced for determining the coverage of this claim included permitting delays that caused significant reconstruction delays. The mold concerns were not discovered until over a year after the fire, with no prior mold sampling ever being conducted. And due to the delayed invoicing, the remediation contractor's invoice was questioned due to the timing and necessity of the work. So as part of the solution to this study, TIA Group reviewed all the documentation, including photographs, analytical reports, and daily field logs. We found that there was no evidence of mold growth before or after the remediation. Samples analyzed by 2 separate laboratories indicated no elevated mold growth. Based on the analytical results, TIA Group did not recommend reimbursement of the invoiced costs. The insured denied coverage, and the insured did not resubmit the claim. The thorough evaluation by TIA Group helps save our client from unnecessary expenses related to mold remediation. The next case study is an overview of challenges faced in a healthcare facility due to mold issues and the solutions implemented. This was a 4-story healthcare facility built in 1999 and experienced moisture issues on the interior wall cavities after there was a building expansion project in 2017. Observations of moisture were sporadic, affecting the east and south walls from the 4th floor all the way down to the 2nd floor. Mold was first observed in November of 2024 with Pithomyces, a common mold found in plants and leaves and grasses, and as Janine mentioned earlier, Stachybotrys or black mold, which is a more gelatinous mold with spores that don't really spread as easily in the air and are often indicative of a long-term wet interior environment. As part of the solution was to make sure that the construction defects in that building expansion that caused the moisture intrusion were corrected, or at least temporarily mitigated before conducting any mold remediation. TIA Group conducted a thorough visual assessments and coordinated with the insured, the contractors, and the consultants. TIA Group utilized a borescope inspection camera to look inside the wall cavities to determine the presence of mold. Using a small borescope camera allowed us to look inside the walls without opening up any large sections, therefore releasing mold spores into the facility. You have to understand that, just because there is contamination within the wall cavities, it doesn't necessarily mean that all the remediation needs to be conducted at one time. It's basically contained inside the walls. So what we did is we established a plan for our routine visual inspections and routine air sampling by the insured's in-house industrial hygienist team to monitor and collect air samples. By doing this, it allowed us to, basically find rooms or areas of the hospital that did have the mold in the wall cavities, and we were able to detect if any of it was being released into occupied space. And if it was, if we were able to discover the mold spores in air samples or were able to see anything, this approach allowed us to isolate and remediate the areas, remediate just the areas of the known fungal impaction with minimal disturbance to other areas in the hospital wing, which happened to be an ICU unit. So as a result, the project is still ongoing with a comprehensive management plan in place. TIA Group provided a technical review of the insured's remediation plan, ensuring the ability to address areas where the fungal breakthrough from the walls was evident and ensure proper containment and the negative pressure, proper containment of the room, and that negative pressure was set up. And by doing this, the facility really benefited from a staged remediation approach. It prevented the closure of large sections of the ICU all at once and allowed us to isolate a certain area and remediate that. And we could do that as the project progressed on an as-needed basis. So effective communication between all the parties involved led to a comprehensive assessment and the successful management of the mold issue. In this case study, it provides valuable insights into an alternative approach used for mold remediation inside a healthcare setting. Okay, the last mold claim that I'm going to discuss today was in a university dormitory. This project involved a potential mold claim due to a malfunctioning air conditioning system in a dorm that had over 110 rooms. A steam leak in the first floor mechanical room caused the system to malfunction, which led to contrasting temperatures and elevated humidity levels, ultimately resulting in condensation on interior walls and windowsills. As part of the solution, Intia Group conducted a site visit to review the timeline and cause of the moisture issue. Upon arrival, there was already renovations underway, and there was no documentation of any mold testing available. Prior to the demolition starting, the team reviewed all available information to determine the facts of the case. So when we got there, basically they had already started the demolition of over 110 rooms in this dorm, and supposedly because of this mold issue. But during our review, we realized that there was no proposals or invoices available for us to review with regards to mold. There were some photos taken, but from only 4 rooms out of 110, and only 2 of those rooms showed any suspect mold. There was moisture mapping that indicated elevated levels of moisture, but this alone doesn't confirm mold growth. What is needed is additional information such as indoor air quality data and surface sampling data to evaluate the extent of remediation that is specifically related to mold. I mean, it's really important. A comprehensive management plan was then recommended to monitor real-time conditions and prevent future issues. You know, this case study highlights the importance of a thorough investigation and documentation addressing mold claims. The collaboration between the insurance company and Intia Group ensured a comprehensive review, leading to the determination that the remediation activities that were being conducted were ultimately not reasonable or necessary as it relates to mold. So I hope these case studies were helpful, and if you have any questions later, please feel free to ask them. Okay, by reviewing the case studies, we have learned that by understanding the timeline of events, it allows informed decisions to be made and gives valuable insight into actions that may or may not have taken place. We've learned that early detection and sampling for mold are essential in determining if remediation efforts are warranted and how those remediation efforts should be addressed. A thorough review of all available documentation, including photographs, analytical reports, and daily field logs, is instrumental in determining the presence or absence of mold growth and if the remediation effort was reasonable and necessary. The review can always be more complex if remediation has already been completed or is in the process of being completed. Data collected through surface and air sampling for mold provides valuable insights into the extent of mold contamination and its impact on indoor air quality. This is vital for making informed decisions. When it comes to understanding the data collected, we understand that it is very important because it provides a record of events and why some actions were taken. This is important for accountability as it helps track the progress and with evaluating the effectiveness of remediation efforts for determining if they were even warranted. In these case studies, a thorough evaluation by Intia Group helped save unnecessary expenses related to costs associated with mold remediation. Timely invoicing and clear documentation of work performed are critical to avoid disputes over the necessity and timing of the work. And by understanding the remediation procedures and options, our knowledge allowed us to present a staged remediation approach for a particular situation in one of the case studies discussed. In another study, routine inspections and preventative measures such as humidity sensors would have allowed for early detection of the humidity issues that were observed in the dorm and would have helped to prevent such a costly renovation. Fortunately, in that case, mold from the humidity issue was determined not to be the driving force for the remediation. A comprehensive evaluation and understanding of remediation procedures has been instrumental in determining the validity of a claim and ultimately leads us to determine whether or not to recommend a reimbursement of costs. This highlights the importance of being proactive and well-informed about remediation procedures. Thanks.
Thank you, Bill. Mold management is important in maintaining healthy and safe environments, and it's important that we have the knowledge and the tools to effectively address and prevent mold-related issues. In this session, we will go over mold identification, proper maintenance, the insured's responsibilities, and effective remediation strategies. That can be found in Antea Group's mold and moisture management plans. We hope you will be better prepared to have your insureds implement proactive measures and respond efficiently to mold and moisture challenges. Ultimately, we are hoping you can help them safeguard their properties and the health of their occupants. Now, let's go over some content from a typical mold and moisture management plan. Mold-related claims often arise due to several key factors, as mentioned by Janine and Bill. One of the primary causes is water intrusion, which can occur from various sources. When water infiltrates a building, from HVAC leaks to faulty construction, it can create a conducive environment for mold growth. Another common cause is inadequate maintenance of building systems. Regular inspections and maintenance are important to prevent mold growth. This includes checking for leaks, ensuring adequate ventilation, and maintaining proper humidity levels. Often during surveys or assessments, I have seen many things in vacant buildings. Some I can't talk about just because they're that gross. I would see vacant portions of building with mold growth on doors and carpeting due to no one inspecting these areas. I've seen drop ceilings falling down. I've seen areas of the roof open to allow pigeons into the unit, and this creates another issue. I've seen this with my grandma's basement, which was often not used due to her age. I came across mold on the walls, the floor, the furniture, artwork, all due to a pipe leaking from under the raised floor. Thankfully, I was able to clean the basement up with the proper tools and perform air sampling to ensure she would remain healthy. Early detection can prevent mold from spreading. Mold often appears as black, green, or white spots on walls, ceilings, or floors. These patches can vary in size and appear fuzzy or slimy. I've seen a vacant guardhouse with many beautiful colors on the gypsum walls. I've seen slimy pink mold on precast concrete walls throughout the warehouse due to high moisture from the tenant's operations. If you smell something, that is probably because something is there. A persistent, damp, musty smell is a strong indicator of moisture and mold. Discoloration on stains and walls, ceilings, floors can also be a sign of water damage. Remember, think of the medical facility with moisture on the walls that Bill just discussed. Another thing I've seen in so many buildings are water-stained ceiling tiles. The leaks are coming from somewhere, and it's best to find those and then replace those ceiling tiles. The insured's role in mold management is significant. Prompt reporting of issues and following guidelines during and after water intrusion events are essential to prevent mold from spreading. These proactive measures can significantly reduce the risk of mold-related claims. Contact the facility management team as soon as the water intrusion is detected to mitigate potential damage. Have a pre-established list of trusted contractors and environmental consultants, such as Antea Group, readily available for prompt action. Identifying the root source of water filtration is essential for implementing a targeted and effective remediation strategy. I have conducted a survey in a multi-unit apartment building. The building was converted from an industrial building into apartments. The old industrial wood floors were ghosting into the unit below,
indicating a potential moisture problem. We had to go up one floor and across the hallway into the next unit. It was there that we opened up the drywall and found that the shower from the unit was leaking and there were actually mushrooms growing in between the drywall. Once that was fixed, we went ahead with cleaning the original unit as no elevated mold spores were found within the air. Once moisture issues are detected, immediately locate and control them to prevent mold growth, which can begin as little as 48 hours after the initial event. Mold remediation should only begin once the underlying moisture problem is fully addressed to ensure long-term effectiveness. I was part of a large-scale mold remediation in a commercial building where the mold was originally cleaned up by the in-house staff. But since they did not address the problem of why the mold was occurring, the mold came back, and it also came back worse than before. That's when we were called in to help with the remediation after addressing the airflow with the HVAC system. After repairing the water leak, document and assess all water damaged areas. Immediate water removal is essential to minimize long-term damage. As I've already mentioned, begin drying within 48 hours. To promote air circulation and accelerate drying, use fans and dehumidifiers. Open small holes along the bottom of the walls at baseboard level to increase airflow and speed up the drying process. Again, maintain detailed records throughout the restoration process, documenting each step to guarantee proper remediation and to track progress. Based on reviewing mold claims, the more information available for review is better for everyone. Different cleanup strategies are required based on the extent of mold contamination. These strategies should adhere to the best practices for mold and water damage restoration, which will be discussed later. I'm going to sound like a broken record at this point, but the key to preventing mold is controlling moisture. You want to fix leaks, clean and dry wet areas immediately, remove contaminated materials, maintain indoor humidity between 30 to 60%, ensure proper drainage. Something I have seen over and over again is letting the gutter systems discharge right near the foundation of the residence or even the commercial buildings. Not only can it include water damage, but it could cause foundation issues. Let's keep the water away. Once mold and water remediation are completed, the affected spaces should be assessed using a reoccupancy checklist. The checklist ensures that no excessive moisture, mold, or physical hazards remain before the area is reoccupied. Remember, we need to safeguard the occupants.
Blowers, dehumidifiers, wet vacuums, HEPA vacuums, moisture meters are essentially equipment which helps to restore spaces to the original condition and prevent future moisture-related problems. Beyond the essential equipment, there are several innovative tools, which include smart thermostat and humidity sensors. Leak detection systems have emerged in mitigating the risk of water damage in multi-unit properties. These advanced technologies monitor leaks and anomalies in real time, enabling immediate intervention and preventing further damage. Leak detection systems can be installed in various high-risk areas, including mechanical areas, basements, bathrooms, utility areas, communal spaces, and kitchen areas. Think of the work that needed to be done at the university that Bill discussed earlier. Because there are no sensors connected to the HVAC system and the space was vacant for the summer, over 100 units were affected by potential mold. Infrared thermal imaging cameras. These cameras are essential for identifying hidden moisture sources that may not be visible to the naked eye. HEPA purifiers are crucial for maintaining indoor air quality by capturing airborne mold spores and other contaminants. Integrating HEPA purifiers into HVAC systems ensure continuous air filtration, reducing the risk of mold spore dissemination. These systems not only save money, but also reduce time dealing with insurance company and the emotional toll on residents.
The remediation process should follow industry standards outlined by the Institute of Inspection, Cleaning, and Restoration Certification. Specifically, the standard for professional water damage restoration and the standard for professional mold remediation. Implementing effective moisture and mold management practices, which we just discussed, is essential for maintaining a safe and healthy building environment. By adhering to proper maintenance, identifying moisture sources, and following industry standards for remediation, we can prevent mold growth and protect both the building and its occupants. Antea Group believes that our proactive approach will mitigate potential risk and future claims. Now I will hand it back to Brian for some key takeaways.
Thanks, Carrie. That was great stuff. So what are a few key takeaways from our webinar today? As Carrie was just going over, I think an effective mold management plan can help an insurer reduce potential claims. Mold growth can start quickly, right? So address any water or moisture issues immediately. Those first 48 hours are critical. A mold assessment should include both visual inspections and sampling so that the mold can accurately be identified. As Janine discussed, the sampling should always be conducted by an experienced professional who follows the guidelines and protocols established by the American Industrial Hygiene Association or the American Conference of Governmental Industrial Hygienists. And then also just recall, Janine had indicated that some states require mold assessors and remediators to be licensed. Reviewed some of the health risks from mold, right? The respiratory conditions that can come from mold, and then in some severe cases, potential infections. And then what are the key remediation steps, right? Control moisture, identify water sources, and have established effective cleanup protocols. And then finally, post-remediation sampling. The work's been done, document that the remediation was done successfully. And with that, I wanted to thank Janine, Bill, and Carrie for sharing their expertise and insights on mold today. And at this time, we're ready to address any questions from our audience. Remember, you can still submit your questions via the Q&A tool up until the close of our broadcast today. Okay, I'm looking at the chat here to see what questions we got over the webinar. Here's one, maybe Janine, I don't know if this is one you want to take. How do you analyze mold air results? Are there key guidelines, practices you need to look at?
Yeah, I can take that. So as I mentioned before, there are no specific numerical guidelines for mold air samples. However, it would be a comparison of, your indoor samples to a reference sample, such as an outdoor reference sample. In addition, that's why we typically like to collect a bulk sample to be able to compare, if there was observed mold growth on a surface, would that sample be correlated to the air samples that were also collected to indicate if there was active amplification from the visual observed mold?
Okay. Thank
so
you,
definitely
Janine.
using that practice and expertise to determine.
There's another one here. After a water intrusion event, how long can it take mold to start growing? I think, I'm not a technical expert like you guys, but I think we said, as soon as 48 hours. I don't know if anyone has any I think I heard too, the environmental conditions that are associated with after the water loss can contribute to how quickly that starts. But any feedback or any follow-up on that?
Nope, you nailed it. Thanks.
Okay. Then, oh, here's a new question. How come there are no standard limits for mold and air samples, for example? I think that's a good one too. From us that are, maybe more classic remediation, right? Like I know when I'm cleaning up a groundwater site, there's a benzene standard, right? There's a cleanup standard for benzene. So yeah, I don't know, Janine, if you want to take that, or Bill or Carrie.
Yeah, I was going to say if you look environmentally across the board, whether you live in a warmer, humid climate, you can have higher levels of mold. And so that value wouldn't necessarily represent a high mold value from an outdoor reference sample in an area like New Mexico, which is hot, dry, desert climate. The other aspect of that too is there is no specific numerical value where an individual would have a health condition or reaction or allergic reaction to a mold. It's all individualistic. So you can't say you are exposed to X amount, kind of like an occupational exposure limit of a chemical, and you would have this adverse condition. So generally speaking, that's why there wouldn't be any sort of specific number to put this to. And
Okay.
just comparing.
And then I see one more, which I don't know, maybe Carrie, how much mold should be present before you call in a contractor? Any thoughts on that?
Typically, they like to see like 10 square feet or more to call in a contractor remediation expert.
Okay. Thanks, Carrie. With that, I don't see any additional questions. So I think we can wrap up our webinar. So again, one last thank you to Janine, Carrie, and Bill. Really appreciate you guys providing expertise and taking the time today to present the webinar. For our audience, don't forget you can download a copy of today's slides and additional materials from the resource list on your screen, which you guys should all see. And then again, this session will be posted on our website in about 2 hours, and you will receive an email link that should take you directly to it. There's also a survey that will pop up after we close the webinar. So if you want to take time to complete that, we appreciate the feedback. And then lastly, just thank you all again for joining us today. Have a great remainder of your day. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.